Hey, this is Rob. This is episode 126 of the Folly Coffee Podcast. Let's get it brewing. All right. This is a totally unexpected episode because I have... Now, make sure I get the pronunciation of your name right, because I know you as European Coffee Trip. That's how I absorb your content. That's how I see you on Instagram, where you have 104,000 followers, on YouTube, where you have 225,000 followers. We connected through TikTok again. This is why I've been pounding this drum since 2019. It's like, be on TikTok. Even if you don't have a lot of followers, you'll connect with people you wouldn't expect. But Alice Pospisil, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, almost. Aleš Pospisil. It was like very close, very close. Nice, Rob.
We'll call that the Minnesota U.S. version of that.
I was so surprised on the airport. There was the control, and like he pronounced it perfectly. I was so surprised because it was such a long time when I traveled, when somebody pronounced it correctly. That is not really in Central Europe where we are from.
Yeah, you may notice there's a lot of people in town for VCon, which is what you're in town for, and I'm sure we're going to dig into that for sure, because it seems to be a passion of yours in terms of social media, with your presence you have and being in town for this. But European Coffee Trip, if you haven't heard of it, is a huge platform on social media. And so you reached out on TikTok and you're like, hey, I'll be in Minneapolis. I'm like, wait, what? And you're like, for VCon. I was like, oh yeah, of course. It's basically like explain VCon for people that might not be familiar with Gary V or what VCon is, or like why it's such a big deal to be in Minneapolis right now. Yeah,
so Gary Vaynerchuk is to me a very inspirational and entrepreneurial person who has a big agency, social media. He's kind of like not really predicting, but he's very, very fast to act on different social media movement, and he was very fast to act on Web3 or crypto art and NFTs. And this is his conference that you get access if you bought the VFriends NFT back in May 2021. And it was actually the first NFT that I and my business partner Radek bought. And year after, we are here attend. And it's a combination of business talk, crypto talk, and there will be live performances from award-winning artists. And I actually don't know what to expect. Like, there will be over 8,000 people attending, 9,000 people attending, and it's starting on Friday, so in 2 days.
Yeah, and I've been seeing it pop up on social media everywhere, people doing events. I know FEMA's doing an NFT gallery this weekend. Now, this episode will have come out Sunday, so unfortunately, if you're just hearing about this conference and all the events around it, it's too late. But a lot of stuff going around with it. You're hearing words of like big-time celebrities, big-time influencers, and in the coffee world yourself, a big-time influencer in my world of the coffee world. And so I kind of want to separate out this episode into a couple different areas that I want to pick your brain about. The first being like, what is your coffee story? And then the second being, how did you grow this incredible platform? Because me and Barnaby, who was a judge at the U.S. Baristas Championship, and we were talking about Morgan, and Morgan Drinks Coffee, and her massive influence on TikTok and how she's been able to expand that, obviously performing at a high level of competition. James Hoffman, obviously, being a big one. And European Coffee Trip is something that I'd be curious in the U.S. how many people know what you're doing versus obviously a much more influential platform in Europe with your own app to be able to locate different cafes and coffees and roasters. How did you get involved in coffee in the first place, though?
It's nice to be in the category of the people you mentioned, because these are the baristas, coffee people, and we were not really coffee people when we started. I've never worked as a barista, neither my business partner. So we started as coffee drinkers who get excited about specialty coffee in 2012, I think. It was my first workshop about the coffee brewing. It was the moment where there was this coffee from Panama that was tasting like the strawberry and yogurt. And at the time, I had no idea coffee can taste like that. It was kind of eye-opening. And then I wanted to discover more. And, especially, I think the US market was already pretty developed at the time. But in Europe, a part of London, there were really few coffee shops that serve specialty coffee. So when I travel, I try to always find these coffee shops, and it was not that easy. There was a few articles on Sprach and maybe some other magazines or online magazines, but most of it was in the local languages, so it was quite difficult to find. So when I was thinking about some kind of project where I would connect my passions and maybe turn it into a business, so the idea of European coffee trip, which means traveling all around Europe and finding these like 5-10 coffee shops, it sounds like a good idea. And we thought, like, even if it fails and we kind of stop in, a few months, it's good because we learn how to make videos, how to make articles, how to write in English, because English is not our native language, right? So it was like the big learning experience. And I mean, we are still learning so much.
Yeah, if you're talking to somebody right now that's listening to a coffee podcast and you're like, do you think traveling around Europe and writing about specialty coffee shops and tasting coffee throughout Europe would be a good idea? I think everyone's like, yes, yeah. I want to do that. So at this time, where were you living? We haven't even really gotten into this part. Yeah. Where are you from? Where were you living at the time when you decided to kind of start European coffee trip?
Yeah, so we are from the Czech Republic, so in Central Europe. At a time where I was actually getting even more interested in specialty coffee, I was living in Switzerland, in Zurich. I was working there in a startup company, and I was doing kind of like the marketing business part of a tech company. And interestingly, there was the first third-wave coffee shop that opened just around the corner from our office. At the time, I knew all the brewing devices and so on. So I saw through the windows that all these devices, there's La Marzocco machine on the bars, like, okay. Hey,
that's always the first sign. You're like, okay, La Marzocco, I got to try this out now.
Yeah, it's not that common actually now in Europe, but when I entered a few coffee shops here in Minneapolis, it was like only La Marzocco. So I don't know, how is it? But I think now Victoria Arduino and other brands are kind of like taking over the market share, at least in Europe, but it seems like the US is still strong, in the La Marzocco direction.
Yeah.
But okay, so then I became a really good friend with the founders, and then when I moved back to Czech Republic, because I decided it's time to start some business, so I explored a few options, and actually a good friend of mine at the time said you talk really with the interest in many topics, but when you talk about the coffee, it's like I can sense the passion, so you should give it a try.
Now, so I want to know what kind of inspired this idea of videos and traveling and kind of creating this map. When you first started, what gave you the idea that this could be a business? Because I think sometimes, let's just say a friend of mine said, oh, I'm starting a business, I'm going to travel around and take videos. Obviously today in 2022, you're like, oh, that could work. Like, YouTube is huge. It's growing. There's so many platforms that you can get your content out. TikTok, there seems to be people exploding up in terms of followers every week. Like, this could work if you give it a shot. When you were doing it, what year did you start? And what did people think when you're like, I'm going to travel and write about coffee shops and film videos?
Yeah, so we started in 2014. I think, as you said at the time, like the scene and kind of the overall, like, kind of the way how you can earn money by creating content was quite different. I think we took it step by step. It was like the experiment. Like we will actually like doing it for free. And so I think it was a really long journey. Like we invested our money, and then we kind of after I think about half a year, we get some first sponsors that we created the series of videos with William Davies. That was the world barista champion that lived and still lives in Czech Republic, close to Prague. So it was a great chance to take advantage of very influential people that are living nearby. I think there was so much development, we didn't think we can be in front of the camera ourselves first, because we were not the coffee people, kind of baristas or experts, and we didn't speak properly English, right? So it was also long journey for us to actually realize that, it's actually advantage for us, because we can relate more to the regular coffee brewers at home or home baristas who might struggle with all the fancy words and description, and who might take advantage of basic language and simple explanation, because that's perhaps much easier for them to understand.
And I love that approach that you're like, even if this fails, we'll learn how to make videos, we'll learn how to edit, we'll learn a lot about how to produce things. Is that something you had experienced before you started this?
Very limited. Actually, the first video that Radek did, or we did, was for the kind of the introduction of the European Coffee Trip. So there was like even more learning experience for Radek, really. And it's funny, like in 2018, so 4 years later, we created a feature documentary about the AirPress. So there's like, 4 years of like very, very intense work, and kind of regular work, because this is what you kind of learn on YouTube or any social media platform. I mean, it doesn't happen very quickly. So you need to kind of produce a lot. Of course, if you have a experience in the topic, and video production can go much faster, and you see these kind of like stars on YouTube that can grow massive following now in maybe year time, but it's rather exceptional.
And how rude of me not even to include that in my intro. I have it written right here that you guys made the AeroPress movie. So I'm sure I've seen it. Anyone that's really into coffee has probably seen it. There aren't many great documentaries about coffee brewers like the AeroPress. And so anyone that's like myself that has formed an obsession about coffee, you guys made the AeroPress movie. So there are some people that may not, in the US, that may not be familiar with European Coffee Trip. They're like, oh, that's where I know them from. But that's such a smart idea, and I can start to see why you kind of relate to Gary Vee and the things he does, because I had the same approach when I started Folly. I was seriously considering at one point going back to business school. And then I'm like, okay, here's something that could cost upwards of $100,000, and there's so many ways to learn. And so what am I really doing if I'm going back to business school? Is it, part of it's like, do I want to take 2 years off from work and just go to school again? Yeah, that sounds kind of nice, but is that really practical at this age or whatever? And then the other side was like, is there anything there that I wouldn't be able to potentially learn on my own? And with all the resources available, it's kind of like, no, you can kind of find it yourself and teach yourself. And then I go, so am I essentially just paying for a potential network of people and hope that I meet someone there, that I get a better job because of that network? And that's part of the decision that led to Folly, is I say, well, what would be the best way to learn about business? Well, it's starting one. And I go, again, if this failed, I may end up spending $100,000, but I will probably learn so much more, and it will be real world experience that even through failure, you can learn things. And you pick up skills along the way that maybe they're teachable, but real world experience, which I think, in my opinion, is much more valuable than classroom setting. And so that was kind of the intention, that even if this thing fails, we're going to learn how to produce videos, edit, do full productions, which is clearly a skill that has massively grown in value since 2014. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't expect like that would be that valuable, I guess. but yeah, I mean, like the video and especially like if you combine like the producing the content for different platforms and learning how to do that, it seems like I feel, as you run the roastery, I feel like still creating content on YouTube is such a kind of undervalued, like that can bring so much potential, and especially if you create like the content that is I think in a way boring for you, or because it's like the brewing guides and kind of the thing that we usually feel that it's already there for so many, there are so many different pieces of content about that. But what I usually say to my friend roasters is like, but they want to learn from you, right? It's very different if they learn it from you or from your barista or from the setup they kind of know, and it's very easy to create, So I think like that's still like big potential, because the YouTube as a platform is still growing, and I think the kind of like creating the library of obviously it's not about one video, right? But like library of like 10, 20 or 30 videos is like that might not be that even expensive to produce, but can still create much more connection with your customers. Actually.
I've never thought about it that way, because I've always kind of had that approach. So like we did a bunch of brewing guides during COVID because like everybody's home, let's do these. But part of me is like, why am I spending the time doing this? Because there are so many brewing guides out there. But yeah, if you're a roaster and someone's buying your coffee, specialty coffee in the grand scheme of things is not cheap. And so if I'm buying something, let's look at a product outside of coffee. If I buy a bicycle, am I going to go, if I get a Trek bicycle, am I going to go to Bianchi's website to check out how to tune up my Trek bicycle? Well, no. And obviously there's difference. There's different machinery and equipment with bikes and sometimes with coffee beans, but it's the same idea. And I've never thought of it that way. That's like, if I'm buying a bag of this roaster's coffee, I want to hear from them how I should be brewing this coffee. And even if it's identical to someone else's recipe, at least it then confirms to them, okay, I am brewing the best way for this bag of coffee that I just spent this money on. That's a very valuable insight, I think. And
I think also, like, the thing about the YouTube is different, that because I think there is not that much competition. If you search for how to brew coffee, how to brew AirPress, so I mean, usually you would watch maybe 3, 4, 5 videos, right? So it's kind of like, it feels like the different content support each other rather than making a competitive. So that's why I think that more videos on the same topic is actually a good idea.
Yeah, and even if and you're seeing this a lot with TikTok, which we talked about briefly in the car ride over here, but even if someone does have the same recipe, there's probably a creative approach. Can I make it entertaining? Can I make it fun? Can I have a unique style that I do that makes it distinctly different from how other people are teaching? That's an interesting thought, and I'm going to keep that in mind. So you start in 2014. You say, we're going to travel around. We're going to produce videos. The other thing I wanted to point out that I think is a really smart thing that you did, and I'm wondering if this was intentional, that the idea is we're going to film experts. We're going to get credible people, videos of them, and this is what we're going to be posting. Was the thought there intentionally that this will prove the credibility of our page if we have experts, or was it like, and it can be a little bit of both, or was it looking at these people and saying they're going to have the best content, and so that's why we want them? Or was it a little bit of both of those?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, we started with the idea that we will visit different cities, and from each city we'll create kind of the list of the cafes, we'll create the article, and we'll create also the video. And there'll be kind of the combination for each city we visit. And very soon we realized that actually we are not that good in producing videos quickly because we filmed a lot, and then it took us such a long time to do that. So that actually we figured out we need to learn more, and we need to find a way how we can do it actually more efficient. So we started to post it on social media, and I think many things went organic, but I think what was very crucial for our journey was that we actually traveled ourselves, because that's not that obvious. Like, we could ask people and try to combine and make this curated list that we do now, because we cannot really keep up with the pace of new openings. But we really traveled, like, from city to city, and we traveled through most of the countries and cities in Europe. And what that built was a very strong network of people we know, and many of them, were baristas at the beginning, now open their own coffee shops or roasteries, or became the World Barista Champions or Brewers Cup champions, and are very influential people right now. So I think that's what was kind of the slow way of building this brand and platform, which is very beneficial, right now, because these people know us in person, and I think we have also kind of the integrity of the content that we created over the years.
Because if you weren't traveling, you'd have to email somebody or call and say, hey, will you film a video with this and send it to me? And it's like, you're asking me to take time and find someone to film and get you this film for what? And now you have the credibility, the following, that I'm sure there are people like, I will film whatever you want me to if I could get onto your channel. But at the time when you're just starting, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that for you. It's similar to this podcast being on a much smaller scale. But when I initially started, it was solo for 6 or 7 episodes. Then it was close friends, and then it was people I knew through business, and then eventually it was people that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. But they could look back on the history of episodes and be like, oh, this is the 50th episode. This is a thing.
It's massive now. And now it's like over 100 episodes, like the very, very huge commitment,
and you can look back and be like, oh yeah, I see other people in the food beverage scene talking on this podcast. Now I'm open to talking on it too. And you start to connect with people that if you didn't do it yourself, if you weren't meeting in person, if you weren't doing the editing yourself and not taking people's time outside of just the time it takes to film, I don't know that anybody would have probably emailed you or filmed for you.
Yeah, sure, true. And I mean, I think it's also like important to say, like I think YouTube was not as we know it now. Like, it was not like, I think still 2014. I think now is, let's say now, like last year, it's kind of important part of the business, but like until then it was like for us investing and investing in our skills, but also investing in building the platform as it is, because also the rates and like the people didn't watch, and there were not that many coffee content creators on YouTube at all. So I think, you know, James Hoffman now is like obviously has a huge following, but I feel like him, us, Chris Baca from US, right? And they were like the kind of the more traditional, you know, the channels, but there were like maybe definitely less than 10, I think, like that were kind of known. And now, like, it's it's a very different story, and the platform itself it's very different now.
Yeah, because in 2014, so I was like a year out of college. If someone would have told me in 2014, it's like, oh, what do you do for a living? And they were like, I'm a YouTuber. I'd be like, I don't understand what that means. Or even if I were to meet you in 2014, you go, oh, what are you doing? Oh, well, you know, I'm trying to build content to become like a professional on YouTube. I'd be like, I wouldn't even really know in my mind, like, what would a professional on YouTube be? At that time, was there even monetization available on YouTube for content creators?
I don't even know. I think there was, but like, I think there was like more. Still like the kind of the sponsor deal, I think, was the bigger thing, I don't even know. Like, it was really, I think, for us the skill that we knew will be, for some reason we knew it will be important, and I think this is how we differentiated ourselves also, like because the creating videos, I think this is how we are kind of known. Obviously we known for, because of the name, we are kind of like, okay, so when I want to find a good coffee shop in Europe, I will go to European Coffee Trip, which is great. And that's how our name helps, you know, very much. For kind of, I think for the other part, which is a lot of content creation and video, that can be a little tricky because, I mean, most of our video is not really about just traveling and drinking coffee, which was in the past. And I think that's maybe interesting for you. That was also a big shift, I think, for us, where we analyze more, you know, the videos that we are making, and we realize that, you know, we cannot really build the platform as big as it is now if we stick only with kind of traveling coffee videos, because one, it's quite expensive to produce, and we knew that we will not be able to travel, you know, always all the time to keep up with the new, or bring new videos, you know, every week or every month. And we also knew that, you know, when we created I think kind of by chance, when we created the videos with the champions, like the AirPress champions, like, you know, that was not like, you know, thousands or 10,000s of views, but like, you know, 100,000s of views. So it was kind of, okay, so people want to learn how to brew coffee. And then we adapted also slowly, bringing people in, like the experts and baristas we knew, to share the recipes and brewing styles. And later also putting my face there and...
With the growth, because you've got a huge following on Instagram too, was this something that as you are looking at YouTube and making videos for YouTube, did you kind of just repurpose it for Instagram? Or how did you kind of get your following on Instagram versus YouTube, and what are the differences between the two?
So we started on Facebook. so like Instagram was not really a thing in Europe, like in 2014. So that early, I don't know if you realize or put it into perspective. I think that we learn about Instagram in Berlin when we already start traveling, and baristas in Berlin, because they are from US, Australia, and so on. So it's like, so what's your Instagram page? And at the time, we didn't know what's Instagram. So that's, you know, that was the moment when we said, okay, we should have a Instagram. And Instagram was kind of perfect for what we did, right? Because it's very visual, and we were visiting, you know, beautiful coffee shops. So that was kind of like the nice fit. But we started Facebook and kind of like the sharing, you know, cafes on Facebook. And what was quite interesting, we did a series of kind of behind the bar photos that I will maybe share with you later. And what we did, basically, we had a GoPro on a stick, a homemade stick, or kind of do-it-yourself stick. And we asked the cafe, like baristas, if we can go behind the bar and do kind of like the, you know, photo and video with them. And I think that was quite a smart move, because then we can tag all the people, and through these people, because there was still like the coffee community was rather small, so people knew or learned about us like through these shared photos, because, you know, Facebook was still kind of the main platform back then.
And I swear in my head 2014, I'm like, yeah, that was 2 or 3 years ago, right? And you're like, no, that was 8 years ago now. So yeah, you're saying like, oh, Instagram wasn't. You're like, you're right. Facebook was still the thing at that time, and because I remember my senior year of college in 2013. In terms of social media, what I remember, I didn't have an Instagram. Obviously had a Facebook. You almost had to at that point. That's where everything got done socially. Mm-hmm. And I remember the tail end of my senior years when Snapchat started to pop up. And it was still considered very rude to take videos and pictures at a party because you're like, hey, we're trying to relax. Can you not take pictures and video? How dramatically that has changed. So to put that in perspective and just be like, so you were really, truly on the early side of Instagram as well. Now, with your growth, did you find it to be kind of linear, or was it something was there a big tipping point where all of a sudden your growth started to build upon itself?
I think for Facebook and Instagram, it was kind of like linear. For most parts, I think so we try to use apply the different trends when they pop. So we practice on Snapchat with the stories and so on. So when Instagram took over the story, so we already practiced on that, and it was quite interesting, I think, for to use and get some traction. We tried or learned, to use the short videos. But I think there was never really like that huge kind of like the hockey stick thing. But this happened on YouTube, definitely. Like the last year, 2021, I think we were kind of expecting to reach like 100,000 subscribers in summer. But then we get like, I think 2 or 3 like very, very popular videos like a year ago. And that kind of really pushed us, the forward. In the same time, it was like COVID, so also other YouTube creators, the James also grew a lot. So I think like in general, like there was much more attention to YouTube. People were people were consuming more content, and also people found there is more content, coffee content on there. So I think that help each other, like all the channels together. I think the guys that started last year also like grew. I mean, they are good and they create really good content as well. But I think that it helped them really that also other big platforms were growing or the brands were growing.
And that's the value of having a lot of content out there before getting wildly popular. Because I've heard stories, especially on a platform like TikTok, where one of your first videos can just pop, and then all of a sudden someone's like, oh, this is funny, or I like this. And then you go over to their page and you're like, oh, they have 3 posts. And maybe you follow them, maybe you don't, because you're like, oh, it was just one video. But if you were to, in 2021, go to European Coffee Trip, be like, I love this video, you've got 8 years of content to possibly consume. And I think sometimes it can be a bit challenging for somebody that's creating content, because you're like, what am I doing? Why am I spending so much time creating this content? But really, you're almost creating a library for someone, if you can envision it. Yeah. Making videos every day or every week or every month, you're creating a library for a future person. So maybe they don't see it today, but if you're able to build a following in the future, you have to imagine that sometime down the line, you're creating this for a future person that can go back and be like, oh, this is what they were doing in 2022. That's hilarious. Or look how different it was. Or look how far they've come since that thing. Hopefully they're saying, look how far they've come, and not, wow, what a downfall happened to them since 2022. So tell me about your weekend. I don't know a lot about VCon. I'm not participating in anything specifically, but tell me about what you have planned. I've already given you my list of coffee shops and roasters that you need to go to. So I'm sure you told me you've already checked out a few shops. I'm sure you'll be checking out all the coffee spots you can, but tell me about this weekend that you've got coming up here.
Thanks for the list. It was very helpful. I came with some ideas, and obviously, when I travel, I want to be honest to what we do actually also in Europe. So I want to explore the coffee shops and see how the scene is different, because obviously Europe is one thing and there are differences in different countries, and that's what we laugh actually about all the exploration. But I think US, the specialty coffee market is much more mature, and there is a bigger demand. So it's nice to see how the coffee shops and look like, and how the kind of the coffee habits of people are. About the VCon, I honestly don't have too much too much planned. So I came 2 days early for that reason, so I can spend some time exploring the coffee scene and exploring the city. And so far it's good weather. I heard it's changing for worse, for the weekend. So I don't know.
The fact that you're going to get 1 or 2 days of good weather, how it's been lately, it's like, that's lucky. 2 weeks ago it was 30 degrees colder than this, and now it's like almost too hot for us Minnesotans. And the weather this year has been weird.
I can imagine. It was in Europe or in Czech Republic also we moved from from winter to summer in a week time, so it was a challenging. For the VCon, actually, I don't know what to share. Like we already touched on it. It's really since we kind of got into this NFT like a year ago, it was based on kind of trusting the Gary and as a person who already suggested many things, for our presence and for our business, from consuming his content. Like he's the one who pushes on being regular and creating content and rather documenting actually what's happening, maybe not thinking too much and showing your personality, because, this is what we discussed earlier. Like, even though you are creating similar content or covering similar topic, because it's you are presenting it through your own angle and through your own eyes. It's very different, and people will. That's basically, people cannot compete on being you, right? So that's a good thing. And because he became so interested in this NFTs, which is non-fungible tokens that can eventually add the ownership to the connection to the brand, I felt like that's cool. And since then I follow. Get into more of the NFT collecting and on different platforms, and I'm kind of exploring what it can also bring to coffee and to either our business or to the specialty coffee in general. So still have one video about kind of NFT or how we bought our first coffee NFT. I don't know if you know what was the first coffee NFT. It was the project of I think Bean Bros in New York City, which was actually a great idea with not that good execution. So they have the Cup of Excellence coffee, limited runs, and they get the idea they can sell it through the NFT. So there was like the artwork that was related to each coffee. It would be like the every monthly kind of limited run of coffees. You get a NFT, and if you get it, so you get a roasted coffee delivered to you. It was well presented. I think it got some PR. I think only a few of the NFTs were sold. We were one of the buyers, so we get actually the coffee as well. And so I wanted to kind of get this into the video, why it failed and why, but in the same time why it can be a good idea, especially for the limited coffee that are very very special. The coffee is tricky, right? Because you have a short shelf life, especially if it's the very precious coffee. So that was the problematic for us as well, because we get it maybe because it was delivered from US like few months after it was roasted, so not as fresh as you wish. But I think it can be quite interestingly applied for different things like comandante, right? Some kind of like very unique limited rounds of a product, which then can be actually sold with the NFT and delivered to the owner per the request. So
I'm not in the NFT game myself, but I love learning. I need to know at least like a base level of everything that seems to be going on, which it's probably not healthy for me, because then I feel like I'm missing out on everything all at once. But I listened to a Gary Vee podcast about NFTs, and because the thing in my head was always like, okay, how can something like an NFT, where a lot of them are just like unique artwork, how can this be sustainable? Because what he said on the podcast made sense. He was basically like, there's a very small group of creators that are really blowing up, and I forget the one with all the pictures of the monkeys. Which one's that?
Bored Ape.
So you've got a creator like Bored Ape, and everything they create is valuable because it's so popular and famous. And he goes, those are rare. It's a long tail of people creating NFTs that don't gain value. But he started talking about other applications, like you said, things that are limited. He's like, picture a ticket to an iconic game. He's like, let's say you go to that Muhammad Ali fight, and there were NFTs back then, and you had an original NFT from that fight that was in limited supply that now has value. And I go, oh, there's different applications to this thing that we're not even thinking about as a general public right now, that I go, that makes more sense to me, that there are aspects of what an NFT, being a non-fungible token, are. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily how it's being used right now, but it can be applied in a way that as we move more and more towards a digital future, it seems, and with the announcement of the metaverse and all these different potential AR and virtual reality worlds that are going to be created, that Black Mirror on Netflix seems to have predicted many of them. But you go, as we move towards that world, it makes sense that something like this will continue to increase in value if done correctly. And I think that's what you said that kind of clicked with me, is like, there are ways to do it correctly, and also sometimes it can be executed not so correctly. And with something like coffee that is best consumed at the most within like 6 months on the long end, and within 2 weeks on like the ideal end, something like an NFT is kind of hard to link to something like that, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, there are like, I think it's still very, very early. So it's still like kind of playing with the technology. I think like I like when they talk about it like as an early internet, right? Like as a I mean, I don't even remember like that early internet, but there was not that many things that you could do, right? Like, you know,
yeah.
It was like it took a long time to connect, you know, like there was like the, you know, text-based website, and we were started, you know, at the time it was like, you know, get a first book how to create a website, how to program a website. It was like such an exciting time. So I think that's what this part of kind of a discover and learning and learning how to kind of consume the content or be part of this is exciting, because it feels like it's definitely future. We don't know like how long time will it take to that everybody. Well, they don't even need to know what an NFT is, right? But there is like some kind of like the digital token that represents something.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about it to be able to comment one way or another, but I will say it seems like anything that becomes huge, and this is part of what Gary Vee is known for, is like making some big time predictions that, like, whether it was Uber, being an early investor in Uber, or calling TikTok like years ago, being like, this is going to be the biggest platform. And people are like, and this is when it was Musical.ly, and he's like, the lip syncing app, you think this is going to be bigger than Instagram or more influential than Instagram? You're crazy. And something like NFT, like I said, I don't know enough to comment one way or another, but you go, most things that become huge in the early stages, most people look at and go, that's stupid. I mean, I'm sure in 2014, when you said, my job is going to be filming and producing this show, this form of a show, and someone goes, is it on TV? And you're like, no, it'll be YouTube. I'm sure there were plenty of people that were like, that doesn't seem like a great idea. And here you are today with this massive following, and now YouTube has changed completely to where now if you're a YouTuber, people are like, oh, that's a great profession. And so to go from 2014, where people are like, this is ridiculous, to like, wow, what an amazing profession. I wish I could do that. And you're like, well, I mean, you can. You just have to go through years and years of figuring it out, it seems.
Yeah. And especially for the creators, of course, that's another part that I think we see what we see with the Patreon, right? Like many YouTubers are on the Patreon, but when you think about like each of the creator can sell their own tokens, right? And create the economy on their own. But it was quite interesting that then on a Patreon you pay for subscription and that you get some perks, right? But I mean, you cannot really sell it, or like, you know, kind of, it's not part of kind of an investment in the creator, that if you trust him early or her early, then if he or him grow, you can benefit yourself because you are early supporters, and which is quite interesting, because then if there is a limited number of tokens that you sell early, that can increase in value if you and so the core supporters can benefit. And I think, you know, maybe it's not that interesting on a coffee YouTubers or coffee podcast, but if you think about some band or some music, if you get it very early, you know, and they you know become international known artists or musicians, that's can be quite interesting. So
yeah, so it would almost be like buying a painting from someone that it's like, this is the second painting I've done, and I go, I think you're going to be huge. I love this painting. You buy the painting, you go, and that's usually the big argument against NFT is like, I can't hold it, and you're like, but now with content and creators and this whole new digital marketplace of content creation being created, that there's. The more I unpeel with NFTs, the more little nuggets I go, that makes sense to me. You hear 9 things that you go, that seems bogus, that seems bogus. And then on the 10th one, you go, whoa, there's something there that you can almost like support an artist, support a content creator by buying this token. It supports them. You might do it just because you're like, thank you for this content. I want this to keep going. Hey, by the way, if this producer or content creator gets bigger, now this thing you've bought early on that's dated, that's early on, if there's a fan in the future, that's going to be valuable to them to be able to have a hold of something like that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think, and I totally hear what you say. Like, anytime I listen to Gary, it's like, and he creates or he shares some of the applications, it's like, yeah, this is kind of the eye-opening, right? Because I mean, you have the technology, but how you can apply is different thing, and I think that's quite exciting, and that's what I hope I will bring back home, like with some more ideas how we can use the NFTs or the Web3 for ourselves, but maybe also for the specialty coffee. Yeah. And I think it's very. I think the specialty coffee is very artistic, and there are like so many creative people, and every coffee bag is kind of piece of art in a way, right? Like many, including yourself, I see now the artwork that you use for the Halloween, right? So, I mean, it can be, I think, just like it can be turned to the NFT, right? Similar to every ticket to the event. Like now I'm attending VCon and the ticket is actually NFT itself. I think there can be like every bag, or at least a very limited bag of coffee can have an NFT, and it can be just for like collecting. It doesn't need to be like investment, right? Yeah. But still it's kind of nice that you own not just a paper version but also digital version, and you can kind of like create your own gallery of the coffees that you drink over the year, because that's what we struggle like with the really physical bags. I mean, I usually throw them away, or we try to collect some of them, but in a digital form it has also some advantages that you can store many of different artworks, and that's another application I think can be rather simple to implement.
And even when you think of, when you're thinking about like the coffee beans themselves, obviously it can be tough. Like you said, we've got this Cup of Excellence coffee, not us, but we were talking about Bean Brothers. We've got
don't?
No, we don't. But Bean Brothers doing this launch and the NFT is not really selling it. You go, well, it's because the coffee has to be drank like right after you get it. And then this is really just kind of a novelty collector's thing that maybe people don't find value in yet. Maybe it becomes a bigger deal in the future. But if you've got physical products as a coffee company, like we were just talking about the Halloween coffee, Darkest Day, that these mugs we have sell out every year. And you're like, well, maybe there's a way to utilize NFTs, whether it's like, it's almost a certificate of authenticity in a way, or it could be like, hey, if you get this NFT, it guarantees you a purchase of one, versus hopefully you get on the website before they sell out. So it's almost like you can create utility of these. And it in a weird way, it's kind of like having the ownership slip to a car, that like you can have the car, but if you don't have the ownership slip, is it technically yours? Even if you bought it, like, can you really say it's yours unless you have that slip that you can go to the DMV with? I have never had a car where I don't have the ownership slip, but I imagine it'd be very difficult to kind of prove the car is yours if you don't have that pink slip.
Yeah.
Now, last question, and we'll finish the episode here and head to the roaster and taste some coffees and go meet Jeff. But what are the initial differences, just being here for a day or two, between the European scene and what you're seeing in Minneapolis so far, and just specifically with the coffee world?
Yeah. So I have been to 3 coffee shops so far. I mean, the first difference is kind of the most obvious, like the bigger size. Obviously, 2 of them were in the kind of hotel lobby, so these are the huge and big. There's like more emphasis, I feel, on the filter coffee or batch brews, which is also now in Europe, but was very different, 4 years, where one way we discover the cafes that I was featuring on a map where they had hand brews. There were like some V60s or Aeropresses on a counter, but because of the demand for the filter coffee grew, so most of them, even though they were not that happy, but adapted to the batch brewers, and if done well, it can be good. I was not that positively surprised. Most of the coffees were taken kind of the takeaway cups, which I'm usually, if I go to the coffee shop, it is kind of the European culture. You sit there, or like you take it to the porcelain. So I asked to have a coffee there so I can have it in the mag, which was nice. But most of the coffees were kind of taken, which I didn't like that much.
Yeah.
But I mean, the spaces were beautiful, actually. I took a lot of pictures there. So that was some kind of from top of my head.
Now, when you say, I would have to guess, tell me if I'm right or not, but you say that batch brew is much more popular here in the U.S. specifically, and Minneapolis, but it is true across the U.S. Batch brew is very popular. Is it espresso that is more popular in Europe, or what's more popular as a coffee serving over there?
Yeah. It's kind of like espresso based. I think like when we did the videos, like so it would be cappuccino, still cappuccino latte, like black coffee. I think espresso, like just espresso, like the black espresso without any milk. That can be even now like the less popular than the filter coffee or batch brew. So but like kind of the espresso machine drinks, like usually cappuccino latte would be kind of the on top of the list. Then I think for the specialty coffees, it would be like. Yeah, filter coffee in the form of batch brew usually, and then it goes like that.
I wish espresso on its own was more popular in the U.S. I think once you become a coffee nerd, you find people that appreciate it much more. But yeah, batch brew is really popular here, especially like V60 hand brewed coffees.
Is it also hand brewed coffee? Like I didn't see like I think
COVID really disrupted. I think so. It's a couple of the points you brought up that I think are specific kind of hangovers from COVID would be takeaway cups became kind of habit. I think for a lot of people.
This was for me like kind of like not that typical to see, because people will be sitting but having the takeaway cups. But I guess it's part
of that. I think part is also there's staffing shortages, so maybe less people are offering glasses because it requires more work or whatever that may be. But also I think a lot of people in the U.S. maybe, this is speculation, but I think a lot of people are like, I might have my full coffee here. I might take it to go, or I might try to get a refill before I go, and I don't want to have to like get dirty a cup and then get this or that.
I think it's cultural, right? It's kind of like the parts, and it's okay. Also, like you usually get the bigger cup, so it makes sense, right? Like you are not sure if you are staying. Like if you have a small cup, like
someone told me that the European cup size for coffee is like 5 ounces. Would that be?
I don't know. I cannot do ounces, but but
well, let's say,
but the smaller. Yeah, I think like even like latte probably would be like smaller than the what latte is in the US.
So 20. I'm trying to think of milliliters here. Okay, so if a shot is like 50 milliliters, then 1 second. I got to figure this out because I want to see what you think about like a 20-ounce coffee. How many milliliters is 20 ounces? So that would be 591 milliliters. Is like that be like a large or like a venti at Starbucks? I don't really know Starbucks that well.
That would be possible to get, I guess, in Europe. That size of.
And then 12 ounces is kind of our standard serving size for a coffee here, which is a little over 350 milliliters.
Still big.
How many milliliters would if you got a cup of coffee in most European cafes?
Yeah, I think like 200, 250. I think would be kind of the.
I think
size,
so. About 8 ounces, probably.
Yeah.
I think if you were in the U.S. and someone said, "Can I get a cup of coffee?" and you gave them an 8-ounce cup, they'd be furious. And that's what we like to do in America. We like to take things and make them bigger than they need to be, because that's what we do. We take things and make them unnecessarily large. And that also explains when people are like, "I only have like 2 cups of coffee a day," and you're like, "Well, technically, you're having like 8." If you're looking at a 5-ounce serving size, which is probably about the standard size that I've read about. But let's head over to the roaster. Let's go drink some coffee, go check that out, and go meet Jeff. But thank you so much for coming on today. And I'll end it like I do every other episode and say have a nice day.
Thank you so much. It was fun.